Today I'm having some very classic Harbin food. So the city I live in is called Harbin, and this food that I'm eating today comes from the fact that Harbin was founded as a Russian. It was founded by the Russians rather than the Chinese. So originally it was a Russian city. It's now in China, and it's a completely Chinese city, but it has vestiges of its Russian past, some of which is some of the food. So the first thing being, bread in China is not really a thing. Like, bread is a Western thing that's been brought to China. They have lots of kind of bread type things like steamed buns and flatbreads and things like that. But this is extremely European. But this is a local Harbin thing. It's its own thing. It's based on European bread. In Chinese, this is called塞克面包. I don't know. I assume the word the psycho is probably a transliteration from a Russian word. I don't know Russian, so I'm not certain of that. It doesn't have a meaning in Chinese. It's just two random words that they've put together. So that's why I think it's a sound translation. But it's very similar to like European crusty on the outside, soft and tender on the inside kind of bread. Like, you can see when you pull the crust off, like, it's just got classic European style bakery bread. So that's quite unusual in China. Nowadays, there are quite a few kind of Western bakeries all over China, especially in bigger cities, that serve all kinds of various pastries and breads and cakes and things like that. But those are very much considered foreign food here, whereas this is sold at a local company that's been operated. So the company that I buy it from is called, in English, it's called Churn Foods, and the Chinese is Chulin, and they've been operating for over 100 years. I think they were founded around 1900. So they've been making this bread for years and years and years, and it's kind of considered a Harbin specialty item. This kind of bread may be popular throughout other parts of Northeast China, in the area where that was controlled by the Russians originally, but I don't actually know the details. I just know that it's very much considered a Harbin specialty food. And then the other thing I'm having with that is called Harbin Honchang. Hong means red and Chang means sausage. So Harbin Honchang is a reddish colored sausage like this. I actually got two. There are two different ones that are part of the same tradition of sausage making, and both fall under the broader category of Harbin red sausage, Harbin Honchang. One, I believe this bigger one, this one is actually called Harbin Honchang, Harbin red sausage. As you can see on the red side, on the inside, it's quite pink or reddish. So like that's where the name comes from. And then the other one is called Ertongchang, or Artongchang. Ertong means a child or children. So Ertongchang means children's sausage. So the main difference between these is the fat content. In the Harbin red sausage, it has very large chunks of fat. And in the children's sausage, it does not. It does have fat in it, but it's more homogenized into a single thing. and different people prefer different ones. So the original one was the one with the big chunks of fat, and then I assume some people didn't like, maybe specifically children, didn't like having all that just chunk of fat in their sausage. So they started making ones without the fat in it. And so they have two. There's the Harbin Honchang and the Harbin Chang. Both of them collectively fall under the title Harbin Honchang when you're referring to them just generally. There are other sausage traditions in China, specifically in the south of China. They have some sausages, but those are very distinct from these. These are very clearly European info. These are based on Russian sausages. They're different. They are their own. It's its own specialized type of sausage, but it's clearly in the European tradition of sausage making rather than the Chinese tradition. It's very, very different from other Chinese sausages. Whereas it's quite similar to like certain kinds of Russian sausages or Polish sausages. And so this is a very classic kind of meal to have, especially for like lower class, like physical laborers and street workers. One thing of this bread is quite cheap, and then one sausage is quite cheap, and you just get a piece of bread and a sausage and just kind of sit there and eat a bit of bread, eat a bit of sausage. Some people eat them separately. I find that getting a little bit of them both in your mouth, kind of like it's a sandwich, just made in your mouth. I quite like that. Sometimes if I've got some cheese at home, I'll throw in a bit of cheese too. I don't have any cheese on me right now, so at my house. So that's not a very classic Chinese thing. That's just a thing I like to do. But all of this Russian history comes from the fact that Harbin's a fairly new city. It was founded in the 1890s. And it was founded by the Russians rather than the Chinese as a stop on and a base for workers when they were building the Trans-Siberian Railway. So the Trans-Siberian Railway was built at the end of the 1800s and early 1900s to connect Moscow in the west of Russia to Russia's major port city of Vladivostok on the on the eastern coast, just on the Sea of Japan. So it's just across the Sea of Japan from Japan. And that's Russia's major open water port. In the West, there's not really any ice-free open water ports that they had, but on the East, they had Vladivostok. And so the Trans-Siberian Railway was built to connect that port to Moscow. And actually, Harbin was built as a junction point for two branches. So the main Trans-Siberian Railway went to Vladivostok. But there was also another port that I believe was controlled by the Russians for all. It may have been controlled by some other European powers at various points. Currently, it's called Dalian. That's the Chinese name. At the time, it was called Port Arthur. And so that was also a European port on the Yellow Sea to the south of here. So that's kind of a little east of Beijing, on a peninsula that stretches down into the Yellow Sea. And so the railway, Harbin was a major railway hub that they built for the junction where the branch down to the Port Arthur port could go and to the Vladivostok port. So it was a major kind of rail transit shipping sort of thoroughfare point. And so for the first 30 or 40 years of Harbin's history, it was mostly Russian. There was actually a larger Russian population than Chinese population for years. At the time, it was considered like a joint custody city. So like China still claimed that it was part of China, and Russia claimed sort of ownership of it and usage of it. It was kind of a gray area city where like it wasn't 100% certain exactly whether it was Chinese or Russian. It was kind of both. Then after World War II, China claimed its full border territory, and Harbin became part of China. And since then, the population has, like, the Russian population has shrank drastically. There's still a lot more Russians here than like anywhere else in China, but they're still a teeny minority as opposed to the just Han Chinese native population. But Harbin is very proud of its Russian heritage, which can be seen in a lot of its architecture. A lot of the buildings here look Russian, and they have architectural features that are designed based on sort of 19th century Russian architecture. There are a number of historical buildings in town that were actually built by the Russians. Pretty much all of the oldest buildings in the city were built by the Russians. And then there's also food aspects, right? So I should have got this other thing. I forgot to get it. There's basically three major things that are clear Russian lineage sort of food items that have no sort of history in China, but are considered very kind of iconic Harbin foods. All of them are sold at this company called Churn. Churn Foods is kind of the sort of most well-known purveyor of these Russian heritage foods. So there's this塞克面包. There's another type of bread that's in a big round loaf that's like really hearty, kind of I want to say like a type of like rye or pumpernickel kind of thing. It's a very brown bread and like really coarse and hearty, and a lot of people don't really like that one. But it's kind of a classic Harbin food. And then this one is more light and fluffy and white dough. I quite like this. It reminds me a lot of like French baguette, or in Germany they have these little sort of breakfast rolls that people will get from the bakery for breakfast, and this reminds me of a larger version of that. It's crusty on the outside, not like super hard crust, but a nice crust, and then light and soft and fluffy on the inside. And it goes really well with this sausage. So the Harbin red sausage, the Chang, is very reminiscent of similar looking sausages you would get in Eastern Europe. Of course, those areas, Eastern Europe and Russia, have a much greater variety of sausages. So, but if you saw a sausage that looked like this and had a similar color and consistency and stuff, the taste will probably be the same. They use similar flavorings and seasonings. Um, for me, the big difference between these two is I don't really like so much raw fat. So if I'm eating it raw like I'm doing now, I much prefer the children's sausage, the Chang. But if I'm cooking it, so a common way to prepare this kind of sausage is to kind of slice it diagonally, so you get kind of coin-shaped, oblong coin-shaped slices, and then fry those in a pan. Often they're stir-fried with other things. You might do it as a stir-fried rice or like stir-fried with some veggies or potatoes or something. But if I'm cooking this, I much prefer the fat adds a nice flavor once it's cooked up, but I don't really like biting into a centimeter cube of just raw fat. That's not really my cup of tea. So, that's my little local Harbin foreign food, Harbin's Russian heritage, and my little explanation of its Russian history. The history of Harbin is very, very interesting because of that kind of dynamic of it basically being an international city. In the early 1900s, it was one of the most prosperous and metropolitan cities in the world. Because of the sort of influence of trade from Russia and China and all of the sort of foreign concessions in China, where foreign countries sort of controlled cities in China, and then and Japan as well. And so like Harbin was like a major sort of industrial and trade center in the East. It's kind of gone downhill since there, but I still quite like the city. But it has a very interesting history. It's quite fun for me to kind of learn about the local history here. All right, I will talk to y'all on the next one.